Well, let me start with the first question. Tell me about how COVID-19 has affected your business, or more broadly, the manufacturing sector. When did you start seeing an impact, and how has the impact of COVID-19 evolved over the last several weeks?
I, for many years, ran the Northern Colorado Manufacturing Sector Partnership. And so what happened very quickly, I'll never forget the day that the stay-at-home orders started to come down. What I realized, Beth, was that I had so many friends in manufacturing that weren't deemed essential. And my phone was just blowing up, be it at Faustin as a colleague, be it at H2 as, maybe they were one of my clients, or maybe it was somebody in the manufacturing partnership that was just wanted to collaborate and chat. What I realized quickly was that these people were panicked. And I think that's when the enormity of the situation hit me. Like, oh my gosh, these business owners are going to close their doors for all the right reasons, of course, people's safety. And they're scared and they don't know what the next step is. And I felt personally accountable, like personally responsible to dig in and help them figure that out. But we've seen many changes, and then these changes best started last year, unbeknownst to many, but we have people out here that partner offshore for automotive business. We have electronics manufacturers, board houses out here that have been impacted by what started to happen in Asia in late Q3, early Q4. They started to see struggles with getting, some of their parts to complete their end product. So we had a little bit of a runway. I just think, myself included, I think that we were really, like a pandemic, of course, that's not going to happen to us. That's not going to happen to me, Heidi Hostetter. I mean, do you agree? It's just kind of like, how did this happen?
Yeah. So you, in manufacturing, you probably saw glimmers maybe in January, even starting, like you said.
Yeah.
A lot of folks that you deal with are getting parts from China. You're starting to hear that, seeing slowdown. Maybe they even have manufacturing operations over there. But then still, it just hit here because you're not fully understanding what exactly is happening in China, and understanding that that's actually coming to a country near you very soon.
Totally, Beth. In fact, the weekend that I finally got it, I'll never forget. I was in San Francisco visiting a friend with my son, who's 9. And when we were coming back, it was President's Day weekend, I think, January 17th or something like that. We were coming back, and I had one of those like news alerts pop up on my phone. I think it was from the Wall Street Journal or something. And I read it, and I realized this is really a thing, because they started to talk about shutting down factories in China. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
And then I started to pay more attention to it. But even then, Beth, I still think I had this complacency. And I bet you most CEOs you've talked to feel the same way, where we just never thought it would come to something this dramatic.
What have you seen in terms of the pivots that you have made in your business or in manufacturing as a result of this pandemic?
There are 4 pillars, and everyone that's worked with me, for me, has heard this. I think that you have to have heightened self-awareness. You have to have ingenuity. You've got to lead from compassion. And here's the biggie: heroic ambition. And so if ever there was a time to have a heroic ambition and ingenuity, it was now. That really was in my head that night. So long story short, we, from that Thursday through the weekend, worked all through the weekend at H2, my staff did. And we came up with this idea where we could design face respirators. We realized pretty quickly there was a PPE concern as far as inventory. We didn't want to compete with the N95s. And we wanted to be able to provide something to the rest of the world, if you will, the rest of our Coloradans, be they first responders, homeless, et cetera, something they could reuse and just swap out the filter.
How many of those masks have you collectively produced?
Yeah, so great question, Beth. We have designed and produced over 1,000 masks. We have lists of nursing homes and first responders that we've provided them to. So you hear 1,000, you think that's not much. But if you think about, this was 6 weeks ago-ish. We've done a little over 1,000 actually of those face respirators. We've worked in conjunction with companies that have done, manufacturers that have done face shields. We have just done all kinds of fun stuff. And we went ahead and created what we call the Colorado Manufacturing Task Force. And it's comprised of many successful folks, one of which I think is a favorite up north, Cathay Reynolds.
Oh, I know Cathay. She's fantastic.
So she sits on the task force, and a lot of our efforts, we now look at how can we help rural. We don't want them to be forgotten. So after I've just kind of spewed all this, the reality is we took one of those principles of my leadership, heroic ambition, and said, how do we help our fellows, period, fellow manufacturers, fellow constituents? What are we going to do here? We got to do something. There's no point in complaining. There's no point in sitting back and just, twiddling your thumbs and judging the situation. You got to, when you're in crisis as a leader, you got to just jump in and try to do something different. That philosophy, learn, fail fast, learn fast.
Yeah. And lean on your values. That was literally, Heidi, going to be my next question, is how have you leaned on your values to help you navigate this? And that's where you started. Like that, it's like I went to my 4 principles and said, okay, heroic ambition, that's what we need here. And let's go with that. So that's just, that's just really cool.
Yeah, I went the other way. I looked at my principles, my pillars, and went, okay, what do we got to do, right? Heroic ambition, ingenuity, lead from compassion, right? Heightened sense of self-awareness. I think you have to know what you do well, and I think you have to know what you don't do well, and you have to know how to bring people into that really complement you, hence our task force.
So I'm going to circle back to something you started to talk about. I know the answer, but I'd love you to elaborate a little bit more. What has been the most challenging aspect of leading your organization and your fellow manufacturing organizations through this pandemic? I'm thinking you're going to talk about the people and the complacency versus fear.
Yeah. Boy, some of the, it might take me a minute to respond to that. That creates pause. I would say definitely what I've found, Beth, through this crisis, this one that impacts people's concern for their health, life and death, quite frankly. You'd like to think that, okay, let me just say, yes, I've been through every crisis that I know of in my adult career, 9/11, sequestration, the financial crisis. This one is different. This isn't just economics. This is people's lives. This is, if it's not theirs, it's a friend, it's a family member. It's a complete and total lack of trust in their government, be it local or federal, right? So here you are steering the ship. You're asking your employees to take your hand and trust you and get through this with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very well said. What have you learned from navigating through this very difficult period of time? What have you learned?
I will tell you, that saying that, how does it go? You'll know it, Beth. I'm having a moment, but what is it they say when you go through crisis or trauma? Those that you least expect will show up.
Mm-hmm.
those that you most expect to show up sometimes don't.
And you've seen that here.
Absolutely. Totally. I've also seen, here's what I've learned about myself is that I realize personal concerns aside, like in the past, maybe I haven't always shared perspective with a politician. Maybe I haven't shared perspective with one of my manufacturing colleagues. And what I've realized is if they have a good idea, none of that matters right now. I've learned that I've grown up over the years and I'm just doing the right thing.
That's great. And that's a great feeling to know that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
The impact of COVID-19 will continue for some time into the foreseeable future. Do you foresee any permanent changes to manufacturing post-pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, I do believe that we'll start to look at, obviously with every manufacturing community, you have an administrative community that supports them. I imagine we'll start to look at telecommuting, remote accesses more long-term than we have, because that's a piece of this we can control. I've already started having conversations with my fellow manufacturers as well as Alicia, our CEO at Faustin, about, how do we access this equipment remotely? Is there a way to do these setups virtually? Is there a way to? So I imagine it's going to force us as business leaders to look at how to run a manufacturing facility far differently than we ever have. That's my guess.
And how is it going to be different? You just talked about telecommuting, but
Yeah. So telecommuting is something all business sectors are familiar with now. We're doing it, right, Beth? But I mean, like a guy actually running his computer remotely through some sort of remote access to the equipment. Mm-hmm. Are we going to utilize robotics to set that equipment up, put that fixture on the machine? I think that this will force us to be innovative in a way that we've not ever had to be, because what they're saying is, okay, well, the fall's going to be way worse. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. I can only look at the data, but I have to assume now the worst.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Boy, I sure hope not. Final question, Heidi. Is there any advice that you would like to share with our students, our community, other business leaders regarding how to navigate COVID-19 going forward?
Yeah, don't ever lose sight of your ethics or your compassion for your fellow man. That is the most important. In fact, today on a podcast, I was asked, because Faustin is deemed critical to national infrastructure, and I was asked this question. So, if one of your employees gets it, you can't shut down, right, Heidi? Because you have a DOD order that says you can't. I said, and let me tell you something, there's not a government in the world that's going to mandate that I don't care for my employees. End of story.
That's a great way to end. And I think, that's something we've all learned in here, just the importance of people and each other and taking care of each other. And yeah, so that's a great piece of advice. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon, Heidi. This was a wonderful interview.